Hi, this is Coach Shawnee Lavender, the Conscious Moms Coach, and I am glad to be here with you today talking about a touchy subject and one that we often don't like to talk about. And that is, or that are, those are our bad parenting moments. Now, we're all going to have our own definition of what that means, but what I mean is those moments when or after which you say, man, that is not how I want to do it. Or what did I forget? How did I forget all these things that I know? Or what was going on with me that I just dropped the ball so much? Or whatever you do when you have those moments, those are the moments that I'm talking about. And specifically, I'm going to talk about two things. One, about recovering from those moments, because it's really essential that we take them and move through them and move away from them, because when we get stuck in them, we are not going to be able to bring forward our best parenting in future moments. So we do want to move through them and recover from them. And we do want to be able to recover with our children from those moments as well, not only for the benefit of our relationship, also, though, for the model that it sets for them, because guess what? You already know this, of course, and yet they're going to mess up in life and they're going to drop the ball and they're going to say, oh my gosh, what was I thinking in that moment? So it's a great model to set for them about, yeah, guess what? We can recover when we don't do well. We can recover so we can do better. So the first step will be, how do you recover from those bad parenting moments? And the second piece is, how can you learn from them? Because in my viewpoint, it's not just, oh, apologize and make amends in that moment. You want to learn from them and you want to find out, what do I tweak? What did make it easy for me to lose it then? So that you can learn and make adjustments so that you can become more of the parent that you want to be. And you can really take those moments, learn from them, really extract all the great value that's there in that gunky junkiness, and take it and grow something new and amazing out of it so that you don't have as many of those bad parenting moments in the future. So that's what I want for me. And so I'm going to share with you some of my bad parenting moments. In fact, this moment that I'm going to share to start came from this morning, just about 4 hours ago. So, hey, it's fresh in my mind, and it was definitely fresh in my heart. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So the thing to know, too, if you've never tuned in before, if you're on YouTube, you can always leave comments and questions, and I'll respond to those after the fact. If you're watching this, though, live on Facebook, then I will periodically check in and see if there's questions or comments so that I can respond to them live in real time. If you're watching the recording on Facebook, same thing as on YouTube. I will come back as long as I know there's comments. I do come back and respond to them. So that's what I have to say. So let me get into my bad parenting moment. And I'm laughing because it's like, yeah, we have them. It's like, give ourselves a break. We have them, and let's work with them. So I'm going to tell you the steps. I think this is the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell you the steps of recovery, and I may start to weave in my example as I tell those steps. So the first step to recovery is you want to notice your feelings and notice your state of being. So it's going to look different for everybody. For me, I noticed that I was having a bad parenting moment. I caught myself. I'm not being a bad parent, having a bad parenting moment. I noticed during the moment. So I was able to start the recovery during the bad parenting moment, which is really exciting when you can do that. And sometimes I totally don't. I go through the whole moment, and then it's only later that I'm like, oh, crap. Did it again. So whenever you do, though, you want to notice your feelings. So for me, part of my noticing my feelings actually came when I saw my daughter's reaction. So as she's getting upset and she's kicking at me and she's crying, I'm feeling the feelings, and it's like, oh, okay. And I was having these moments of, okay, I'm doing it right. And then, oh, not so much. But so I was starting to notice right then and there. And so I removed myself from the situation, in part because that was easy for me to do. My husband was there as well. I also knew, though, it's like in that moment, I was not helping the situation. And so I find for me personally that I do better when I can remove myself for a minute, recover some equilibrium, and then come back to the situation. So I was noticing agitated feelings inside of me, upset. So I removed myself. So that's the first thing you want to do, is notice your feelings. Like, our feelings are super guides for us. They are there to say, hey, something's out of whack. When you feel feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, distress, anxiety — I think I skipped my thumb — anxiety, worry, did I say fear? Those types of emotions, they're not negative emotions. There's no such thing. Those emotions, though, are signals to us that something's out of whack, something's out of alignment. Because when we feel those emotions, part of what's going on for us is we're getting signals from our body, from our physiology, and from our environment that, ooh, we just don't feel at ease. We don't feel at home. We don't feel settled, safe. And so that's part of the way we're programmed as humans. It's so amazing. And so those feelings are there to say, hey, Shawnee, wake up. Or hey, Bruce. Or hey, Bridget. Or hey, Natalie, wake up. And so notice your feelings, or your state of being, is your first step for recovery. The second thing you want to do for recovery is tell the truth to yourself about — I wrote down the pain in my notes. I said about the pain because to me, it's that those emotions are — something is out. Something, again, it's off, out of alignment with who we really want to be, with how we want to show up as a parent. And so for me, what that looked like this morning was, I have to close my eyes to be able to do this. So I was by myself. And so I was like, man, my heart really hurts, because I could see that the way I was doing it was I was part of my daughter staying stuck in her pain. And that to me is really distressing, because at worst, I want to be a neutral energy in her life. Mostly I'm striving to be a very positive energy and contributing to her in a positive way. And at my worst, I'd like to be simply like a neutral, no contribution. What I saw, though, is that what I was doing was actually further exacerbating her upset. And so it really is not at all how I want to show up with her. It's not how I want to be. And so that's telling the truth. It's like, ooh, I feel sad and I feel distressed that the way I was doing it, that's what it was happening. So that step, I think, is really important, because so often from our own upbringing and other things, we've we've learned to minimize sometimes the truth. And so sometimes we'll say, well, I was really doing my best. Well, yes, that was true. And yet I was contributing to my daughter's distress. So I think it's important to tell that truth to ourselves so we can really get clear, like, yeah, that doesn't mean I'm a crappy person or a bad mom. It simply means that's part of what I was contributing. So that's the second step, is tell the truth to yourself about the pain you're feeling. And also that can include, like, I'm really wanting to be a comforting person for her and to be a safe person that she can go to or be with in her distress. So that's also telling the truth. The third step for recovery that you want to do, or I invite you to do — I don't know if you want to do it, I'd like to invite you to do it, experiment, tell me, give me feedback. How does this work for you? The third step is to acknowledge yourself for anything that you did right. Now, again, right's subjective, so is wrong. From your perspective, though, it's like, what did you do that was working? Even if 95% of what you did was crappy in your opinion, there's 5% that worked. So acknowledge that. Be aware, like, what was it? So for me this morning, one of the things I did is when she had distanced herself from me physically, and I went back over into her space, not, right into her body space, but nearby. And I got down below her. She was on the couch. I sat on the floor so I'd be below her eye level so that I would physically not be a threat. I also stopped talking, which hard to believe that I would do that. I know, because here I am, talk, talk, talk. But that's one of the things I do that I know doesn't always work well. So I stopped talking for 10 seconds. And so I acknowledged, like, yeah, okay, I did those things. Now I still got off track, but it's like, I did those things. Yay, me. Still, I'm doing some things well, even when I don't do other things well. The fourth step you want to do, again, I want you to do is you want to forgive. I want you to forgive yourself. It's good to forgive yourself, because guess what? Yeah, you know what? You didn't do it the way you wanted. That doesn't mean, again, that you're a bad parent or you're a bad dad or a bad mom. It means that you didn't do it the way you wanted to. So forgive yourself, because when you don't forgive yourself, there's a lot of other negative repercussions that are more likely to keep you stuck in a negative cycle in your relationship than if you forgive yourself and say, you know what? Yeah, did some things not really well, did a few things well, and I forgive myself. I forgive myself. I'm still lovable. I'm still worthy. And I can forgive myself. And again, remember, part of why you're doing this, not the only reason, part of it is certainly for your own healing. The other reason, though, is don't you want that for your child? Don't you want them to not shame themselves or feel super self-critical thoughts or hate themselves or think they're an awful person when they make a mistake? Yes, of course you want that for them. So if you want that for them, you get to model it for them, because they're not going to be learning it out in the real world, so to speak, because I can tell you there are definitely examples of forgiveness. A lot of what we see, though, in mainstream is not that. And so our kids get plenty of messages of not forgiveness. They don't need more examples of that. None, zero, zip, zilch. You want to give them that example of forgiving yourself, showing them what that looks like. The fifth and final step for recovery is to reconnect with your child or whoever you've had this bad moment with. Maybe it's your spouse. my spouse was sort of involved in our parenting moment this morning as well. So, but reconnect with your child, and you want to apologize and make amends. Like, if your child, so ask them, is there anything that you would like me to do to set this right with you? Most often, probably they're going to say no, or give me a hug or what. But, they might sometimes say, yes, I'd like this. And so you can consider, is that something that feels right for you to make amends in that way? So that's part of your recovery process. You're doing it with yourself first, but then it is reconnecting with your child, apologizing, and as needed by them, making amends. So that's the recovery process. It's 5 steps. They're not easy always, because they're emotional and they can be charged and we can feel really vulnerable, and yet they're not hard steps. They're all things that any one of you can do. If you need support with learning how to do them, if you don't have the sense that these are skills that you have, go to my website, ShawneeLavender.com, and book a complimentary session with me, and let's talk about, if this is something I could support you with in your journey as a parent. Because guess what? You're going to bump up against this again, probably many times a day, and certainly many, 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 many times in your life with your children. And so you want to have these skills on board. You want to be able to do this for your own well-being, and again, for the model that it sets for your children. So let me pause. So the second part that I said I would cover in this video is about learning, about taking these bad parenting moments and learning from them, so that 2 things happen. One, we show up as the parent we are really striving to be and intending to be. And number two, so that when we learn from these bad parenting moments, then generally what's going to happen is we're going to have fewer and fewer of them. Certainly of that same variety, you're going to have other ones, right? But still, you're going to have fewer of them. So to me, it's a really essential piece for our own growth. Also, though, for our relationships. My experience, if people who I get into conflict with only apologize, I mean, that's great. Some people don't even do that. But if they only apologize, and yet the same behavior keeps happening over and over on their side, it leads a little bit of, it leads me to be a little bit wary of, okay, well, they apologize, and yet are they making changes? So to me, in terms of your relationship with your children, you want to be doing this learning step because you want them to see that you're serious about, yes, you made an apology, this thing didn't work, and now I'm working to make change so that I do that less often. So that's my soapbox about why this learning piece is really essential to your own well-being and your children's. So there are 5 steps to this one as well. Isn't it cool? So 10 total steps, 5 recovery, 5 learning. So the first learning step is to set out the data and the facts. So I put those in 2 words because sometimes I think facts can lead us to, well, I'm only going to say things that are these super verifiable, so on and so forth. You can also have some subjectivity in here. I would invite you, though, to be truthful with yourself from your perception and not harsh, either on yourself or on your child. So, and I'll give an example of this in just a minute. So I'm going to do this part, I think, different than I did the first part. Guess what? I'm in charge of this video, so that's why I'm going to do it. So the second step you want to do is you want to identify what's one main issue to address. So after you've laid out the facts and the data and you have a better understanding of what went down, what really happened back there, you want to then choose one thing to address. One, because it's much more manageable. If you're like, well, there's this and there's this and there's this and there's this, I mean, come on, that's just too much. So pick one thing, and you're more likely to be successful if you pick one thing at a time and really focus. So after you've identified that one main issue that you want to address, then you want to, step number 3 is you want to choose one new action within that. Okay, it's going to get clear as I talk. So you got the main issue, and now what's the one new action that you want to take? What's the thing that you want to experiment with and see, does this help you change those kind of scenarios the next time they happen with your child? Step 4 is then you want to implement the action. So don't just choose and think, hey, I'm going to do this thing, and then never do it. Step 4 is implement it and practice it. So you might implement it once, you might implement it 372 and a half times. I don't really care. It's like, implement it, try it on, experiment, see how it works. See, does it work the way you thought it would? Does it work the way you intended? Does it work in certain situations and not in others? So practice it, get familiar with that new way of being, that new action that you've chosen. Number 5 is you want to tweak the process. So based on your experiments, based on what's happening, based on what you notice inside, what is the response from your child, you want to take all of that new information and start to tweak and say, oh, well, maybe I'm going to do it this way next time. And it's not that you're going to be formulaic, because we're humans. Formulas are not, I think, very effective for humans in when we think of them as a rigid, like you must follow these 3 steps, although I'm giving you steps here. So, but what I mean by that is it's not like you take one instance and say, oh, that didn't work, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's like, oh yeah, there's other components. So tweak it, play with it. The goal in my mind is to be learning and growing, and to be becoming more aware of what's going on in you with your child in the context of your relationship. And you also want to have real nice flexibility and adaptability so that in any given situation, rather than just being, oh, well, here's what Shawnee said to do, or here was step 3 of thus and such parenting resource, it's like you have that creative ability to be able to say, oh, I'm going to go this way. Oop, that's not working. Now I'm going this way. So you have this way of flexing and flowing, moving with that organic process that is called human beingness. That's the way it is. It's organic, not formulaic. So those are the 5 steps. Like with the recovery steps, they are easy to do. You can do them. I have faith in you. I know you can do them. And they're not always simple because we have our own blind spots and things we don't see, things we're not aware of. So again, if I can support you in that, reach out to me, book a complimentary session with me. Let's talk about if there's a way I could support you. So let me take you through some specifics with all this so you can really be like, oh yeah, I have a handle on it. So here was the full example, or at least full for this video context that happened for me this morning. So my daughter was in bed, and it's school morning for us, and so I thought she was still asleep because it was quiet in her room. And so when I went and opened the door, I was a little bit surprised because I heard some sounds. It wasn't her, but I was like, oh, what's that? She had her Kindle and she was listening to a Magic Treehouse story, listening to an audiobook version of it. And she was doing an art app on her Kindle. She was snuggled in her bed. And so I was just surprised by that, right? So that's the first thing. I was like, oh, you're awake. How long have you been awake? Type of thing. And so started to go through the process of the morning. I got some clothes out for her and gave her a kiss and connected and went back out. Well, I come back in a few minutes later we're about half an hour away from when she and her dad were going to leave to go to school. And I started to talk to her a little bit. Well, her Kindle, the volume of her Kindle had been set quite low because we were listening to the story at bedtime last night, and we keep it low. And for some reason, the buttons were not working to make the volume go up. And so she was frustrated with that because I'm talking and she can't hear the story anymore. So then she gets frustrated and she starts to react to me. She's turning away and mistake number 2, because mistake number 1 from my standpoint was I started talking to her before she was really ready to hear me. That's not my normal approach. So from my relationship with my daughter, that's not the way we do it. And so that was my mistake. My bad parenting number 1 was doing that. Now, a thing that I did well, that I talked about in that recovery step was I had connected with her in the morning. I kissed her and loved on her. And, I didn't right away go, oh, what are you doing on your Kindle? It's just like, oh, okay, I'm going to go do something. So she's starting to react. And rather than, here's mistake number 2, rather than being aware of her state of being, which was agitated and upset, and being empathetic towards that, I was more up in my planning, mama, get the day going brain. And I was like, well, it's time to start getting ready for school. And so that is further exacerbating. So now I'm not appreciating where she's at, and I'm basically adding more stress to her state of agitation. So now she's even more, oh, go away. So, and now, of course, right now I'm getting ramped up a little bit, like, oh, what's up with that crabby girl type of thing, right? That's an internal thing that goes on for a lot of us when our children are grumpy with us or short or, kicking us away or saying, go away. So this is some of the data and the facts that when I went through that learning process, I'm like, okay, what actually was going on? So it continued. She ended up coming downstairs and I brought her clothes downstairs, and rather than giving her some space, I kept staying in her space, nearby. What I was wanting to do was to help her turn up the volume so that she could hear her story when it was time to be listening to it, and that she could also access the button to pause it. Well, my daughter's almost 7.5. And so a third mistake, or 12th, whatever, number we're at now, was I was forgetting where she's at in her development and her wanting authority over her life. She hadn't asked for my help to turn it up. Now, she was frustrated that the volume wasn't up enough, and yet that is not the same as, Mom, could you help me turn this up? She wanted to be able to do it herself. And I, again, mistakenly didn't recognize that, or certainly didn't stop and when I was clear and that's what was going on. And I kept being in my place of, well, I could do that, and if you just let me do it. And so now I have my agenda. It's like, now I'm wanting her to let me help her, just give me the thing and I'll fix it for you. And now I'm also getting tense in myself about, okay, what's time is it? Is she getting ready? So lots of different things started to cascade. So let me just fast forward so you can sort of see how the things I did were not working. So on this learning step, that's what you want to go through. And you don't have to go through it in as much detail as I'm just wanting to make sure you're really clear on what I'm talking about and my example. So, but you want to set out those facts. What was really going on? You might even lay out the fact of, my daughter was still tired, or, my daughter was really into her story and her art and not really into getting ready for school. You can lay those out as well. But then you want to identify that step 2 of the learning. What's that main issue I want to address? And so for me, when I consider all of what was going on, the main issue that I would like to address is my continuing to push on something when I was seeing that it was not working. And I'm seeing it's not working by her reaction. So it doesn't matter, who's at fault. That's not the point of this exercise. It's about, like, I have data. She's reacting. She's crying. This is not working. So I kept pushing through that, which is something I sometimes do, old habit. And so that's what I wanted. That's what I've chosen to address, is the keeping pushing when I see something's not working. So the third step in the learning process is then to choose a new action. So I say to myself, okay, Shani, so you see that pushing doesn't seem to work very well. What are you going to do differently? So I said to myself, I said, okay, I think one of the best things for me to do is to practice pausing quietly. Challenge for me, okay? Honestly, it's a challenge for me. So rather than continuing to push in my words, in my body action, again, sort of following, like, I'm going to follow you downstairs now, and so on and so forth, to put a pause in there. And I mean that both not saying anything, but also pausing my body, like, okay, let her go downstairs for a minute. Yeah, it's okay. Pause, Shani, stop. Stop where you are, freeze. So that's the action I've chosen, is to practice pausing, being quiet, freezing, so that I'm really still. And so now, as you know, from step 4 and then step 5, step 4 is going to be to implement that. And I did it some. I told you that one of the things I did well is I got below her eye level, and I did pause and was quiet for about 10 seconds. So manage it for 10 seconds. But now it's up to me to, okay, let me implement that again. Let me practice that even in a non-stressful time, because I know my way of doing things is obviously very verbal and very involved. And so I can tend to push that way as a sort of standard thing. So now I get to practice that. So my husband, since he's watching, he's going to hold me to this. I'm going to practice doing it with him. I'm going to practice doing it with my daughter. I'm going to practice doing it in non-stressful situations so that I get that feeling in my body. Okay, Shani, what is it like to just be quiet for a second after somebody said something? I don't have to respond immediately, in other words. What's it like when maybe I want to go be with my daughter, even in a good time, quote unquote, can I just pause myself for a second? Like, oh, I want to go snuggle with her. Okay, well, give myself 3 seconds and now I'll go do it. So I'm not saying this is the answer or it will be the answer for me. It's what I've identified, what I've chosen, what I say, I'm willing to play with this and I want to experiment and see how it works for me. Because based on what I saw this morning, part of the overall theme of what was not working from my side was that pushing energy and that sort of being relentless about, I'm going to fix it, I'm going to turn the thing up for you, or I'm going to be here, or whatever. That's that sort of in your face kind of energy. So that's one of the things I think didn't work. I've identified that as a main issue. I chose a new action to pause, be quiet, be still physically, and now my job is to implement it and practice it and then tweak it. So I hope that's really clear from my own example. If you want to share your example of what's your situation, probably the best way to do that is book a session with me, but you can post it on Facebook or YouTube, and I'm glad to do my best to say, oh, let me throw out a couple of ideas for you. So in closing, what I'd like to do is give you a quick recap of the 10 steps that I took you through this morning, 5 for recovery and 5 for learning. So recovery, that first and really important step, because that's where you want to start. You don't want to try and just learn from it when you still have tender feelings and things are swirling around. It's just like giving your children empathy first and then working with them to choose new behaviors and problem solve. You do it the other way and it's not going to work. So in recovery, your 5 steps are: notice your feelings and your state of being whenever you notice them. In the moment or after the moment is fine. Number 2, tell the truth to yourself about the pain and what happened and how you feel about your bad parenting moment. What's really true for you? Are you sad? Are you scared? Are you frustrated? Are you, bewildered? Whatever. Tell the truth to yourself about what went on for you. Number 3, you want to acknowledge yourself for anything that you did right. And that's your opinion, but you do want to do that. Take that time to be like, I did this, even if, especially if you don't have practice doing this and or the moment was a really bad parenting moment in your opinion, you may have a hard time finding something good. So it may be what you did well was that you didn't have a huge overreaction. Maybe it was a big overreaction, but it wasn't the worst you've ever had. If that's the best you can do for acknowledging yourself, that's great. Just acknowledge yourself for things you already did well. Number 4, you want to forgive yourself. You want to release that and know that, yeah, it wasn't how you wanted to show up. It's not what you wanted to do. And yet you're human and you're doing your best. And you're also committed to growing and changing. So forgive yourself. Give yourself that gift of forgiveness. And number 5, you want to reconnect with your child and apologize. And as they request, when you ask them, make any amends that are appropriate so that you are, repairing that relationship. So that's recovery, 5 steps for recovery. The 5 steps for learning, which is the next part, is to set out the data and the facts. Really be truthful, not harsh, just truthful, honest with yourself. What actually went on? Where did you see things going wrong and maybe you didn't stop, or where did you not see it and now you see it? Just lay out those facts for yourself so you have a clear picture of the scenario. Second thing you want to do is then identify what's one main issue of the scenario that you had that you want to work on. What do you want to tweak? What do you want to change? So pick that one area. The third thing to do is then to choose a new action. So you've got this bigger area that you want to work with. Like I said, mine was, pushing, seeing my pushing energy and sort of being in your face. So I then chose an action of pausing, being quiet, and being still. So you want that action to have something, what can you actually do? What's something tangible that you can do and experiment with? It might be something you say in your head. It doesn't have to be out, observable by others, and yet it is something that you can actually say, oh yes, I did this new thing. The fourth step in learning is to implement that action you've chosen and practice it. So as I said, implement it in non-stressful times, implement it with other people as appropriate, practice it. You don't have to wait till the next time your child is on their Kindle in bed in the morning, when they can't hear the volume. You're not waiting for that specific exact thing to happen again. You want to do, in similar scenarios and non-similar, practice that new action that you've chosen. And the fifth thing you want to do is you want to tweak it. So especially based on what you observe in those stressful moments, how do you want to tweak it some more? So I might find, for me, for example, that maybe my pause needs to be longer. Or I don't know if it needs to be, but maybe I find I'm going to experiment and say, well, what if I made a 20-second pause versus a 10-second? Or, maybe I'll make it shorter, only 5 seconds. So that's where you want to tweak and make those fine-tuning adjustments to really, this is what works. This is one of the ways that I can tweak the process so that I don't have that same kind of bad parenting moment as often or to the same degree that I had at that time. So I know that's a lot of information, so feel free to watch the video more than once, bookmark it, take your time to digest it. If you feel like I can only do the recovery part first, start there. Great, do that. Get good at that. Then do the learning piece. But play with it. Let me know how it goes. Please leave your comments or questions. I'm glad to interact with you because this is the work I do. I support parents around the world in being the kind of parents they want to be. So not just, learning more, doing more, actually implementing it so that they can show up as that mom or dad that they want to be for their children and build those kinds of relationships based on love and connection and patience and empathy and kindness that they want. So I'm glad to support you in that way. You can check my website, ShawneeLavender.com, if you'd like to book a session with me. Another really great place to interact with me and other parents on a conscious parenting path is in my Facebook community called the Conscious Moms Circle. So you can look us up there and join us. Really great group of folks, about 3,000 plus folks from around the world. So I'd love to see you there. I'll see you next Thursday. I will be here with another Facebook Live on conscious parenting. And if you have a subject or a topic you'd like me to address, feel free to put that forward and I'll put it in my, my list of topics and do my best to respond to you. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.